So the first time I saw Brandon was at church. It was a Sunday morning, and I was sitting with the people who I usually sat with. I didn't have too many friends at the time. And this guy walks on stage and starts talking about this mission trip to Los Angeles that he had been on. And I didn't think too much of it at the time. He was just someone talking. And then that night I went to a small group, which is just a gathering of people around the same age through the church, and they meet at someone's house. And when I got there, he wasn't there yet, but shortly after, this guy shows up and he sits down next to me, and we introduced ourselves and whatnot, and he was very quiet, so throughout the night I was trying to talk to him, make him feel a little bit welcome and whatever, because I knew that he was kind of new to the church as well. And I think the first thing I actually said to him was, "You were that guy on stage this morning?" Of course he said yeah. And I think that night we did end up talking about Captain America, so good signs from the start. And then kind of after that, nothing really happened. We would see each other every Sunday or Friday or whenever. And then we would say, be polite, talk to each other. And one day the conversation turned towards what we had studied or what we were doing. And he said he had gotten his master's in literature. And I always describe it as my ears perked up, because he was the first person I'd met who had an interest in reading and was actually educated in it. So after that, I think I definitely had some interest.
So I got back from my mission trip from LA, and I was asked to go on stage to talk about it. And after I did that, I was invited by some other people at the church to go to a small group. Now, a small group is when you have specific groups of people of a certain age bracket come together to hang out for a little bit and talk and whatnot. And I went to the small group that night, not really knowing who Brooke was, but I met her. And we started talking, and we talked a lot about movies and television, and we got along really well. It was cool. But I didn't think much of it. And after that night, we would see each other at church on Friday or on Sunday. Not all the time, because Brooke wasn't there all the time, but once in a while we'd see each other, we'd talk in passing. And around May, it was the long weekend, and we were both invited to a barbecue that one of the people were having. And I know that Brooke was going, so as I was sitting beside her and we were all talking about this, I just said, "Hey, can I have your number so that I can get the address for this?" And she said, "Sure, I'll do that." And she texted me the address. We went that night. I didn't really know anybody then too much. I spoke to a few people, and I spoke to Brooke a lot. And as we were walking that night to go to see the fireworks, I remember that we were having really good conversation. And I remember telling her and the other person that was with us that I was really happy that they were there, because without them I wouldn't have anyone else there. I'd be by myself.
And I remember around Victoria Day in May, there was a barbecue happening, like a bonfire type of party, and we were both invited. And then he asked for my number. That was how he asked. So he said, "Hey, can you text me the address?" So since then, that's how we had each other's number. And then I think shortly, throughout that process of being friendly and polite to each other, we added each other on social media, and I think he followed me on Instagram first, which is always a good sign, in my opinion. I don't know. But that night actually plays very well in my head, because one, we got to talking about our experiences a little bit and where we had been and such. And then on the way to the park to watch the fireworks at 10 p.m., we were talking about our favorite types of stories or comic books and things. And again, he was the first person that I was able to have these types of conversations with. And it was just something about standing next to him as these fireworks happened. Both of us taking photos on our phone and just being totally amazed. And there was just this really serene calm about the whole moment. And I could tell that I don't know, we were gonna not necessarily be more than friends. I don't know, just something meaningful about standing there next to him. After that, nothing really happened until July, but I know that in June, I was having a really bad day at work. And I actually don't know if I've told him this before, But I was having this really bad day at work, and I was like super stressed out, and we had been kind of talking and tweeting each other, and I was just for some reason like having this moment in my head that kept like replaying, imagining us being together, or like imagining him as my boyfriend. And I was just like kind of thinking like, that's crazy, but how much better would it be? You know, like how it was calming to be thinking of him in that way, and it kind of got me through that really bad day. And then July happened.
A few weeks later, our church youth was having a baseball thing, and my cousin was visiting at the time, and I wanted to take him, and I didn't really know anyone, still didn't really know anyone yet. So I asked Brooke, I actually messaged her on Snapchat, asking her if she was going to go. And she said she didn't really know anything about it, but she said, I'll go if you're going. And so I said, yeah, I'm going. And I gave her the details as I knew it. Unfortunately, these details turned out to be wrong. We ended up at a park that was not where everyone was, and we had no idea where everyone else was. So instead of just calling it a night and not doing anything, we decided to go to Wendy's and just sit and relax for a bit. So we went to Wendy's, and it was me, Brooke, my cousin, and her friend. And we sat there, and we got Frosties. And for the hour or so that we were there, it was just nonstop Brooke and I talking back and forth, talking about TV and movies and a whole bunch of stuff. And our friend and cousin was just sitting there, completely silent the whole time. We tried to bring them into the conversation, but it didn't work out. But Brooke and I were having like this really great back and forth. We had a great rapport with each other. And after that night, my cousin, when we got back, he said the funniest thing to my mom and to me. He said, you know, that girl likes you, you know? And I said, I know, right? And he told my entire family about it. I'm like, why are you telling everybody this? You know, I don't want everyone to know my business, whatever. And after that, Brooke and I started talking a bit more. We would text each other once in a while, just in passing. I wouldn't see her. I remember there was a time I didn't see her at church, and so I messaged her asking her, you know, where she had been, what she'd been up to, and we spoke a little bit, and she told me what she was doing, and, you know, I told her that I missed my, I can't remember the term I used exactly, maybe my church buddy or something of that nature, you know, as you do.
So it was closer, it was at the very end of July. We had each other on all the social media, we had been talking back and forth, whatever. So he sends me a message on Snapchat, which is like, if you know the etiquette of all the different platforms, you know that like Snapchat is not very official, but it's like sneaking it in there. And he messaged me and said, hey, are you going to the baseball thing with the youth? And I didn't know about this, but our youth group was meeting at a park for a baseball game. And I said, no, I don't know about it, but I'll go if you go, you know? And that completely went over his head, which is still like hilarious. And he said, cool, I'm going with my cousin. So he told me where it was, and I drove there with a friend of mine, and we met them. And no one else was there. Like, it was empty. The park was like bare. And we're wondering where it is. I'm texting some people, and it turns out that Brandon had the address wrong, which is, again, super hilarious. And so I, at the time, was like kind of interested in him. So I had like looked really nice, and I was all excited. I'm like, no, we're not saying goodbye at 7:30. Like, we have to go do something. So I suggested we go get ice cream, which we did. So we drove to a nearby Wendy's, and we got Frosties. And for like the hour that we sat there, Brandon and I were in like this nonstop conversation about movies and TV shows, and I told him about the plotline from my book and all these things. And we were just like kind of in our own bubble. And my friend and his cousin, who are not very talkative and kind of shy, were both like off staring into space because they had nothing to add to this conversation. We kept trying to drag them in, but it wasn't working. And it was just him and I. And yeah, kind of awkward, but not for Brandon and I. And the way that he tells it is that after that night, he was like, oh, maybe I like this girl. And he made this Instagram post that was a photo of the clouds because he's obsessed with clouds. I don't know. And he said, went out to play baseball, but maybe had a better night instead. Which I knew was like a hint to me, so I took that as a good sign.
I think that was a really big part of our relationship in general, was just tweeting each other. And that's how we really were able to sort of kind of flirt, really, without actually flirting. We would like we have these super long threads on Twitter where we just go back and forth for like hours on end, just talking about craziness. And we really started to gel that way. And later on, when August came around, I knew that Brooke had liked me. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that exactly, because I knew that I had to make sure that I was in a good place, and if I wanted to do something, I had to make sure that it was the right thing to do. It's what God wanted me to do. My motivations were in the right place, all of that stuff.
And then, yeah, through August, it was like a lot of tweeting and whatnot. And then at the very end of the month, when I kind of knew that I really did like him and I was interested in him, I wanted to go out to the movies with him, but I didn't want to do it just us two. So I had a couple friends that I really wanted him to meet, and I asked him to come out, and the movie was Ben-Hur. That was what was playing at the time. So I thought it was fitting because it's like a Christian movie, and I knew Brandon was really into films and stuff. So I said, hey, do you want to come out? I've got a Guyanese friend I want you to meet, since Brandon's Guyanese. And I think it'll be fun. So he came, and the movie was great. He got along really well with my friends.
I call this her test to everyone I tell, that she invited me to go to the movie with two of her friends, and we went to go see Ben-Hur. And after the movie, we just sat and we spoke for a while, and we just talked all about it. And I think that was really the sign for her, the definitive sign that she was interested in me, and she wanted to see where this could go. Later that night, she sent me a very long text message.
And so this is like the moment when it happened. After the movie, I texted him and I said, hey, you were really great with my friends and whatnot. Next time you and I should do a movie alone. And he knew at that point like what I was hinting at. So,
and I told her that, you know, if you're asking me what I think you're asking me, then that's something that I need to pray about, for sure. And it only took me a couple of days to get back to her, but little did she know I had been praying about this for some time already, for a few weeks actually. And when she asked me out, I just had to pretty much confirm. So I spoke to some people that I trusted. I spoke to, that night actually, that Sunday night, she was away because she went with her family to Niagara Falls. And I had another home group, and I went that night and I spoke to one of our home leaders. His name is Andrew, and I asked him for his advice. And I told him, I didn't tell him who, but I told him that there was a person and that I didn't really know what to do about that, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And he gave me some really solid advice that I need to hear. And I spoke to another one of my friends, one of my best friends, Tian, as well, and she gave me some pretty solid advice too. And after that night, I did a really solid night of intense prayer, and I pretty much settled on, okay, this is not only what I want to do, but God wants me to do this. And so the next day, I said yes, and we said, okay, we're gonna go out.
He said, yeah, if you want to do another group thing, that'd be great, but if it's just us two and you're asking what I think you're asking, I need to pray about it, which at the time was like a secret wish that someone would pray before pursuing me or dating me, so it was actually very meaningful to me that he did that. And I told him to take his time. I told him I'd been praying about it as well. And I expected his reply to come like weeks later, so I wasn't really holding my breath, but I was hopeful and excited. I wasn't too nervous. And I was in Niagara the next day. We'd gone on like a one-day vacation, and I get a text like 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, and it says, hey, I talked to my advisors, because he's dorky that way. But really, he had just been praying about it and asking his friends for some guidance. And he decided that, yeah, we should go out. So I was super happy about that. And that day was actually August 29th, which we have decided to be our anniversary, since that's kind of the day that we really started. And after that, it was just like a short series of really unofficial dates, I guess. A few of them were with people. We didn't really like go out on our own alone at all, because some things were just like sporadic and spontaneous. So like one night, for example, I went out to Dave & Buster's with my friends, and I texted him, which was actually like a sly move on my part. I was like, hey, do you want to come out and play some games with me? Because, if he says yes, then he's definitely interested. And so he said yes, and then he came out, and that was a really fun night. One of the best dates I've ever been on.
Later that week, she was out at Dave & Buster's with a few friends of hers, and she slyly invited me, saying, hey, do you want to come play some games with me? And of course, if you're interested in somebody and you've already agreed that you kind of want to go out and they invite you to something, you have to go. So, and I love games as well. So we went to Dave & Buster's, and that's probably one of the best dates I've had in my life. I met her friends, and we kind of just ditched her friends, and we were just walking around Dave & Buster's. I don't know how many laps we did, to be honest, but we were just walking around and talking for hours on end. It felt like. And after Dave & Buster's, I drove her home. That was the first time I think that we had spent any like alone time together. Not that anything really happened, but just to see that we were sort of comfortable with one another and we could really get along.
And then it was like maybe 2 weeks into September when he told me, like, I went out with my cousins and my friends and I told him I have a girlfriend. He said he hoped that was okay. And I said, yeah, normally I'm not too quick to develop a relationship like that, but with you I'm kind of certain. And he was too, so that's kind of the story.
So I went out with a couple of my friends and cousins, and I told them that I had a girlfriend. And later that night, I texted her and I told her that I said this, and I asked her if that was okay because we had decided, we weren't really official yet. We decided we wanted to go out, but we didn't really know how we felt about it. And she seemed pretty certain, and I seemed pretty certain, and we decided that, yeah, that's something we want to make official. And that's when we really started dating. And we've been together ever since, and it's been a good year.